Yo, yo, Jason Blummer here. And every Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern, we do Facebook Live. This is the Ask Jason question series where we have a lot of people send in questions about their firm, and we strategically offer some advice and guidance on how to answer those questions. So you can see behind me, just shoot the question to info@thrival.com. Just send your question there. And if we answer that question, we actually may send you some swag. We may ask for your address and send you some Thrival swag to answer that question for you. You probably know we are in the middle, I guess we're in the middle of a series on virtual firms. So our question last week was about just describing what a virtual firm is. So it's a 4-part series. So this is the second part of our virtual firm series. And Gene asks a great question, and there's a lot of nuance to this question that we'll get into. He says, how do you get the client to convey their agreement virtually through an online conversation? So that's the question. So Gene was asking, when we were talking about virtual firms, how do you get clients to communicate with you virtually? And this has a lot to do with the difference between brick and mortar firms or brick and mortar companies and virtual companies. There's one thing that brick and mortar companies have that they don't actually realize that they have, and we'll use that to answer this question. And that thing is basically nuance. In a brick and mortar company, there is so much power behind the nuance and how you interact with people in your company. And that nuance not only extends to the team, but it extends to the clients that come to that brick and mortar location. And when you're virtual, you don't have any of that. You don't have any of that. So, Gene, we'll answer your question very simply here in a minute, but I want to add some things to the fact that virtual firms are void of nuance. Oftentimes, it's hard to get. So what that means, no matter what you're doing, if you're onboarding a new client, if you're pricing a new client, no matter what you're doing, you've got to work around the fact that you are void of nuance in a virtual situation. And how do you do that? Well, everything has to become intentional. That's how you counter the void of nuance with being highly intentional. So the less nuance you can lean on, the more intention you have to give into working in your processes. So that means you can't just assume a client's going to show up for a meeting. We make meeting appointments, then we confirm those meeting appointments. And then when we meet with the client online, which we do face-to-face on a camera, on a virtual platform like Zoom or GoToMeeting, you actually tell them what you're going to tell them. And then you tell them that thing, and then you kind of summarize the thing you told them. Whereas in brick and mortar, you can kind of get body language, and you can look in the eye of the client, and you can understand a lot of things. So what you have to do, Gene, is when you're working virtually, you can get the client to convey their agreement, virtually a lot of ways. But you can't forget that you are void of the nuance, and you have to be so intentional to make sure that the client doesn't make up things in their mind about your services or your agreement and things like that. So it could be, for example, I'll give you some examples. Working in a virtual company means you won't see your team and you won't see your clients. And so if you don't see your clients periodically, then there's no nuance from them visiting your office that you're actually real. You're a real company and you're a real person. Though they know you are, the mind can play games on them. So you have to intentionally bring them into your firm in a very ordered and structured way. That's just being very intentional, because in being highly intentional offsets this difficulty in having a void around the nuance that's so common in brick and mortar. So what we do is when we bring a new client into our firm, we have a kickoff meeting. And the kickoff meeting is just to say, hey, we're beginning a relationship. We're just not going to assume we're beginning it. We're actually going to state that. This is the beginning of our relationship. That's what we say in our kickoff meeting. And then we go around the virtual room and have everybody introduce themselves. The team does, I do, the client introduces themselves. And then we say, this person is going to be your caregiver. They're going to care for you through the relationship. If you need anything, email them. We have to tell the client everything. We have to tell them how to behave in every way, and there can be no no assumptions around nuance of how they're going to feel their way through the company. Now, if that client was in a brick and mortar firm, they would come to the firm, they would meet somebody, they would give somebody their papers, they would see and feel and sense the caregiving from other humans, but they don't get that virtually because they're in their home or their office all by themselves, never having met our firm. So we have to counter that void of nuance with a high level of intentionality. And you do that with structuring things in a very ordered way. And so, Gene, we not only get people to agree virtually by signing, they basically sign in electronic signatures, a PDF document, our contract basically. We meet with them over GoToMeeting or Zoom. There are many times we require turning on cameras, or we say we're all going to turn on our cameras, and that way we can see each other. So those are just some ways we interact virtually. Really pretty easy. But Gene, the thing I wanted to sprinkle into this conversation and into the answer of this is you have to be super structured. You have to put everything in very intentional orders. And if you don't, the humans you're serving, even the team you're working with, will tend to make up stories in their head. And so you have to fill those stories with accuracies. You have to tell them exactly the things that they need to be doing or the ways they need to be behaving. So Gene, we answer your question. Just get people to sign electronically, meet with them. Anytime we're doing proposals, we always have a proposal meeting. We show our screen. We show them the high, middle, low options that we offer them. So those are the ways we counter being virtual. But the one thing I want you to know is being virtual means you're void of some things. And so you have to be super intentional and structured and process, and everything has to be in the right order. You can't get things out of order because nuance won't feel your way through, oh, you meant this, sorry, okay, meant this, well, oh, that came first. None of that happens virtually. If you get something out of order, everybody's confused until you write that order again. And so those are just some ways you have to interact virtually. So I hope this series on virtual firms is helping you guys know how to run virtual firms in more accurate ways. This is fun stuff. We've been doing this for a long time, 8 years, something like that. We've been virtual. We were brick and mortar before the first 8 years, actually. So we've learned a lot about how to be a virtual company and what it takes to run a successful firm. So I hope that helps. Thank you for joining us for the Facebook Live. If you want to send a question, just do that, info@thrival.com, and we'll be glad to answer your question on a Facebook Live in the future. Thanks so much for signing up and tuning in. We'll see you. Bye-bye. Hey, hey.